work no matter what happens to the video? Do you have a cassette in the camera? So we will don't have. Do we have a way to capture video? Okay. Just a moment. Yeah, just I'm asking Raj, and I'm hearing that we're not to try to do it tonight. If you have more time that you want to work on whatever the glitches are, do that or go, but not to try to have the gathering tonight. Am I broadcasting? Sure.
Yeah, that's what I need to do in order to test the settings.
He's indicating that the intent and the devotion to having the meeting was what needed to be accomplished, we'll say, tonight.
I would like it if we could have some talk. I mean, and if people could ask questions, or it would be great if we just did the workshop and we just didn't worry about the audio and let me, get everything working, because it's when you're actually doing the workshop, the audio is different. You talk differently. Your volume is different. Uh, you know, so I would like to have time to adjust when you're actually talking, not in an artificial sense, because you know what.
No, he says tonight is not the night to do that. To do it that way.
Okay, I'm just saying that I need you to talk more, I guess.
Oh, I'll be glad to talk.
Great.
I'll be glad to talk some more.
So it would be great if I had somebody talking on a microphone. French fries are always friendly in France. Test 1, 2. I like French fries in France. France has French fries. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Hello, hello. This.
Just a moment.
Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test. Test 1, 2. Hello. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test. Test 1, 2. Test. Test 1, 2.
No, I'll be glad. If you want my voice, to work with, I will. I'll be glad to talk. He's declining to say anything right now. That's all I can say. That's all I can say on that. But I really appreciate the time and the effort you put into this, Chris.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't begin to do what you're doing.
Well, with my success rate lately, it looks like I'm not doing well either.
Yeah, but I couldn't even begin to fail at what you fail at.
I fail so much better than you.
It's such big things, too. I mean, complicated things.
That's right.
So
it's not easy to fail.
I'm humbled by your failures, you realize?
Yeah.
This morning when we got up, I had the funniest feeling that there was some time needed, further time, before we move forward.
What'd she say?
Susan was saying when she woke up this morning that she had the feeling that there was to be more time to consider what was said last week. For whatever it's worth, the things that he's saying are putting me through my paces. They're stretching me. It seems that circumstances make me feel like I ought to be doing things, and I seem then not to have the ability to get any traction and get anything done, and then I will get frustrated, and then finally I realize, wait, the feeling that I had and the attempt to accomplish something that I couldn't accomplish and then got frustrated by, all happened without my doing the two-step, for lack of better words, in the very beginning to ask, is taking a step appropriate? And if there's a step to be taken, what is it? So, how can I say it? Implementing what he's saying is not being easy. It feels like I'm being required to do more things that I don't know how to do, or that I'm being required to do more things that I'm unable to accomplish because I don't know how to do them. And some days it has meant that I needed to sit down and be still and be attentive, listening without making assumptions, and persist at listening, even if it's 3 or 4 hours or more, without hearing an answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's how I feel.
it's like there isn't a viable alternative to silence and attention. And that's not a comfortable place for me to be. Because infinite patience brings immediate results. I know that's not an exact quote, but it's like when I do actually become still and in my peace, then I do know what to do. But if it takes me 8 hours to arrive at that point, I have to take 8 hours to do it. That doesn't leave me feeling very functional.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be depressing. But I also feel that there's a threshold that I'm moving over. There's a threshold that he's moving me over, a threshold I think he's moving all of us over. And that threshold is moving over that threshold is moving into a different way of behaving, of being, of approaching things. And like he said, it doesn't feel entirely natural. Yeah, Judy was saying that last week he mentioned that your definition of our definitions of ourselves, we're not going to be taking with us across the threshold.
What about other people's definition of us?
What about what?
Other people's definition of us?
Oh, what about other people's definitions of us? Well,
Because
all I can say is
I'd rather take mine than theirs.
Yeah, you'd rather take yours than theirs, I
Yeah.
guess. Is your mic working?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can't hear me? You can't hear my definition of you?
Yeah. No, it's good.
I just turned it up a little bit.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
The audio is working? Question mark?
Yeah. Well, I can't hear her, but I can hear my audio.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
I was going to say was
I'm tweaking it as we go along here. So
when I do manage to get into that place of peace, then other people's definitions of me don't even occur to me. They're not even, they're just not present as any kind of factor. So, I guess what I'm saying is that if I have another week to practice what he's been talking about, which might mean another week of lengthy periods of sitting in silence because I'm not hearing the answer, but the only way to have the answer is to continue to listen, then I'd rather do that than move on and abandon this point, which seems to be absolutely essential, even though it's uncomfortable or tedious or... Pardon? Yes. That Judy said, isn't that what the holy instant is supposed to be, so that it doesn't take 8 hours? And
I want the holy instant. That'd be better.
right. Yep. You have to say yes to God. Well, so far to me, saying yes to God means me being silent, me not inserting anything before what God says, and then being attentive enough to hear what needs to be known in that moment. That's do we have a hand mic, Chris?
No.
Okay.
Um,
Susan is saying that an interesting thing that Deepak Chopra was saying on his radio program
mm-hmm.
was, look at the space between your thoughts, the space between each other. Look for the space between. Oh, I see. And that's not what is attractive. The empty space is not attractive because there's nothing in it, and so it's like the holy instant is empty, and therefore it isn't nearly as interesting or attractive or compelling as the things we can imagine and think. All I can say is, Judy, you said that the holy instant, means you don't have to spend 8 hours. But at least for me, if it's taking 8 hours, it's because it's taking that long for me to get to a place of genuineness in me about not grasping for control. If it's taking 8 hours, there's something in me still grasping for control. And so therefore, my willingness to be present in the moment is not as genuine as it needs to be. Judy's saying that the ego says there's a certain way you have to approach it, a certain way you have to be in order to get the answer or the clarity, and she's saying that isn't true. All you have to do is what? Whatever willingness you offer, God will fill it. all the other stuff about, oh, I've got to get rid of control and so on, is not real. I guess what I was saying was that when it does take a while, it's because I'm not relinquishing. I am still fascinated with anxiety, or I'm still fascinated with the thoughts and so on. But I do have to shift my allegiance, because when, I can sit and I can breathe and I can relax and so on, but I still find myself feeling justified in being reactive and not abandoning that, even while I'm sitting there choosing to become still. Or there are times that I'll be sitting choosing to be still, and I don't even feel like I'm doing anything active at all, but I feel not overwhelmed, but I'll say overwhelmed by negativity. That I would not say I am initiating. It's like an energy or an atmosphere that I'm in that I'm not responsible for, but I'm, but it feels like it calls for me to do something to protect myself. And there's a point at which I have to be willing to give up my allegiance to reacting to that or letting that be important. And until yeah, Judy said you just have to be willing to let God do that for you.
Because as long as I think I have to know something, and I have to do something, that's the enrollment.
As long as she feels like she has to do something.
That's the enrollment into a whole sea of problems.
That's the what? Enrollment?
That's the enrollment, the belief that I have to do something.
That's the belief that she has to do something.
The enrollment into a whole sea of problems. Can I not let God do it for me? Maybe that's all the willingness I have is.
She says, can I not just let God do that for me? This is me. I mean, of course, this is me, Paul, but I don't know. Can you? Not
No,
just.
I mean,
What if I feel like that's what I'm doing? And I'm sure a lot of other people sit down needing answers, and they feel like they're genuinely being willing to let God in. And it doesn't happen. And all I'm saying is that if it doesn't happen right away, I find that I have to avoid judging myself and becoming reactive to that, and valuing not being reactive and being willing to continue to be allowing to the best of my ability, Sue was saying there's another aspect that makes it so difficult. That is having a goal and having it wiped out, and having a goal and having it wiped out, and having a new goal and having it wiped out. And and not being afraid.
Yourself is not on your mind and your problem. God is on your mind and truth is on then all that I have to be is willing for that. I'm willing for that. And I forget, and then I'm the center again, and then my problems are. But then, see, the answer isn't to figure that out. It's to abandon it. You must abandon yourself and the problems and have God and the truth be on your mind. Not the truth about me, not the truth about them.
Okay.
It's the truth that's going to fill me and give me a shift of perception where God fills me up.
Judy's saying that Raj had said that we're not supposed to be the center of our attention. God is, and our problems aren't supposed to be the center of our attention. Truth is, and so there has to be a willingness to let God be the center of our attention. And I guess what I'm saying is, it's hard for me to imagine. Well, no, that's it. When I sit down to be still because there's disturbance of some sort, or a call for correction of something, that's what it feels like I'm doing, is letting God be the center of my attention. But like you said, then you might find yourself thinking, and you've got to go back. And sometimes that, for me, that process goes on for 3 or 4 hours. And I'm not going to stop persisting in letting God be the center of my attention, because something's happening. And where I used to be able to pretty successfully accomplish things that I set out to do or that I thought were right, it's not working anymore. And so I'm left with no alternative but to do what Raj says, because anything else is not working. But this new thing isn't working instantaneously. Sometimes yes, and sometimes I stay with it. There's an even keel, so to speak. But boy, do I love to think.
Are you saying that it takes 6, 8 hours just to be able to hear Raj?
Michael's saying, am I saying that sometimes it takes me 6 to 8 hours to hear Raj? I can always hear him acknowledge that he's present. But yes, I'm saying that there are times when I can't hear more than a word or two, no flowing sentences, because in a way, recently, there's an undercurrent of disturbance that feels uncomfortable, like a sensation in the pit of your stomach, and you don't know why it's there. And there's nothing going on in your life that seems to call for it. No, it's not physical, but it's just anxiety can feel like going down a fast elevator, just that sensation, but it doesn't, I'm not saying there's something wrong in my body. Judy's saying, don't you think that's the ego knowing its number is up? But wait a minute, I wasn't. What I.
It's like those backup, beep beep things on the truck. It's here and everybody's struggling.
Yeah, it's when that happens. Sometimes it feels aggressive. The disturbance feels assertive, like against me. I don't, in other words, and so I have to really consciously become quiet. I have to really consciously choose not to become infatuated with it and obsessed with it, and feelings of anxiety that say I've got to get rid of it, and choose to let God be the center of my attention. But how do I distract myself from the only way I found that I can, what was the word you said? How do I distract myself from it? The only way I know of is to sit down. I will meditate. I will use a mantra. And I will say, Raj, are you there? It's just a single word. It's TM. It's, or sometimes I do take a phrase from the workbook or the text, whatever. But generally, I try not to use words that make sense.
Using a phrase that preoccupies your mind and makes noise in your mind, correct?
If I use a phrase, it makes a distraction or a noise in my mind. Yes, it does.
So doesn't that interfere with listening?
Does that interfere? What?
Doesn't that interfere with being able to hear, listening? listening to Raj.
Oh, doesn't saying a
So
mantra
you're
or a
making noise
phrase.
in your head so that you can't hear Raj
No, no,
because
no,
you're
no, it's
listening
not
to
like
that noise in your head.
Yeah.
He's using it like a mantra. In other words, if
No.
he's thinking, he introduces a thought of truth until the thinking calms down. I think there's something else you can do though too, which is to say, it's a lie. Persisting in, like, doing the dishes, taking a shower.
Oh, Judy's saying that
It's like,
there's another way to do it. That you might do the dishes or take a shower or do something irrelevant in a way to the, or just say to it, it's a lie or whatever.
What I'm referring to is Raj has said many times that the only real defense against the ego is to ignore it.
Michael's saying that he's remembering that Raj said that the only defense against the ego is to ignore it. The only thing that the ego can't defend itself against is disregard.
Yes. So if you couple that with another thing he told me, which was to put my hand on my solar plexus and breathe. When I'm breathing with my hand on my solar plexus, I'm listening to my breath, feeling my breath go in and out.
Mm-hmm.
That's a listening activity.
Mm-hmm. He's saying that Raj at one point had told him something to do would be to put his hand on his solar plexus and breathe and be present with the with it, and that's a non-thinking. It's a listening. It's an attentive. Yes.
Yes, and then that attention creates silence or space.
And that attention creates silence or space.
If there's Raj communicating, it can be picked up.
And so if Raj is, or one's guide is communicating, it can be picked up.
Because there's
Yeah,
a little,
but yes, I shared Michael was saying this, and
well, that one last point, and that is that Raj says, or the Course says, a little willingness.
and he's also mentioning that the Course says a little willingness is.
5 pounds of willingness or a lot of willingness.
Doesn't say a lot of willingness or 5 pounds of willingness or just a little.
A little bit is all, because the discussion that you and Judy were having was as if there had to be a threshold reached, so therefore you got to get a certain amount of quietness. In other words, my experience is I'm hearing my guide talk to me all the time. In other words, if I say to my guide, "Are you there?" my guide will say, "Yes, we're here," and then he'll make a comment like, "We love you," or "persist," or something to that effect. So any attention I put in that direction will cause a response. Like, I'm always with you type of thing.
Or that just you feel present.
Michael is saying that he's able to hear his guide talking all the time, and I guess the thing is that there's some sort of, I think there is a threshold I'm coming up against in my own growth or forward movement or whatever, because yes, I've certainly had that experience, but it seems in the recent past here that that on the spur of the moment, it's not that easy for me to hear.
Well, is it easy to hear, or is it spur of the moment willingness? I mean, like, is the hearing not easy, or is the willingness not easy?
Okay, Judy's saying, well, is the hearing not easy, or is the willingness not easy? Exactly. I would say it's the willingness, and getting to the place of willingness is what sometimes takes 4 hours. Now, I used an extreme thing. I would say in the last 3 months, there have been maybe 2 or 3 times that I needed to sit and meditate for a whole day. Okay? Now, that's extreme. This doesn't happen all the time.
But you're not really, you hear calls for help.
Yeah, Susan is saying, but you hear calls for help.
When you're meditating
And
all day,
that's true. Sometimes,
not on your mind, you're
sometimes when that's happening, it feels like steadying the boat. Except that I have no idea what the disturbance is or anything.
And
I-
you're joining with the way it's working.
Judy says, and you're joining with the way it's working.
The way it's working. You don't even know how it's working. Like, who knows?
She said, you don't even know how it's working, what the mechanics of it are.
I feel, they tell me I'm not doing anything. It doesn't always, maybe it's not as personal as you're interpreting it, that you're sitting there for, I'm not sure what, but
Judy says that her guidance says to her sometimes, you're not doing it. You are, how'd you say that? You're not doing nothing. Even though you don't know what you're doing, you're not doing nothing.
Now wait, I need you to interrupt and let people, I keep hearing, I hear it right now. Let people know what we're doing tonight.
Okay, again, for those who are just tuning in and finding that something's happening, we've had difficulty with the computer programs and getting the audio and the video to work properly, and Chris needs to be able to find what needs to be corrected while we're actually broadcasting. And so Raj said we would not have the Course in Miracles study group tonight. And so we're just chatting, and we're a little bit handicapped because I'm the only one with a microphone, and the people that are here are saying things, and I'm having to relay them, and I may not be doing a totally perfect job. So what we're doing is just being together, chatting, and I'm trying to get it into the microphone so that Chris has a real live broadcasting situation in which to find what's wrong and correct it. So that's what's happening. And we've been talking about the fact that maybe it's a good thing that there's another week to incorporate what he said the last time.
The other thing is that Raj has said, I don't know if he's ever said this in a meeting, but he said it to us individually, that the disturbance that we're feeling may not be ours.
Right.
Just because
Michael's bringing up that Raj has said before that sometimes the disturbance that we're feeling may not be ours. And that's correct. And sometimes, over the last few months, when there's been disturbance, although I couldn't hear, a long dissertation from him, he would identify where the disturbance was coming from. Other times, the disturbance was significant enough that I couldn't hear. And so I guess I just want to say, I found that when the times come that I can't hear, and I feel like I'm really genuinely listening, and I don't hear the answer, I am refusing to engage in frustration, even though it feels like I'm wasting totally wasting a day, or being totally ineffective, and I could say, well, I could just get upset. That's all. I am taking to heart what Raj is saying, and I'm refusing, to the best of my ability, to engage in the kind of thinking that it takes to become frustrated. Okay? And I'm saying, okay. It's like in the beginning. I sat down, I had been told there were guides, and I said, okay, I want to get in touch with my guide. And I did it for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and I didn't hear anything. Finally, I said, okay, well, if you want to talk to me, you better hurry up and do it, because I've got better things to do than sit here and hear nothing. And so I still didn't hear anything. My point is that somehow it was conveyed to me that I was trying to strong-arm the universe. I was bringing willfulness in to try to force whoever this guide might be to talk, and that would absolutely block it. And so I said, okay. Within myself, I didn't say it to anybody. I just shifted my basis of operation, I guess, my modus operandi, and I said, if it takes a year, if it takes 2 years, I'm just going to continue to listen. No strong-arming the universe, no deadlines, and so on. And it was only a matter of 2 days after that I heard him. So I guess what I'm saying is that I find myself in that position today, where sometimes I have to sit and be willing to let God be the center of my attention without any results, and not engage in reactions. You know what? There's something, an experience I've gotten from that, and that is that the world hasn't collapsed with my with my losing a whole day, not doing anything but listening, and so levels of urgency about living life, a shift has gone on. Because if I don't have control for even longer periods, and I don't have control and I don't have answers either, the world hasn't collapsed. And so I'm learning that general levels of anxiety that I've lived my life from aren't valid. And I think overall, from this, I am generally becoming more stable and more at peace and more grounded in the infinite, let's say.
What about this? When you sit there for a whole day, does it ever gel that you were saying, I don't know what this feeling inside of me, that's a disturbance, and then at the end of the day, it bubbles up and you go, oh, that's what it is.
Michael's saying that when you have this, like the whole day, does, and nothing is coming through, does it ever gel or bubble up and it's like, oh, now I know what it is?
That's bound and preventing you.
What is truth about the answers?
Okay, sometimes yes.
Sometimes yes, and sometimes
Sue's saying,
you'll whisk,
Sue's saying sometimes yes, and
you'll whisk him away
sometimes
into something practical,
Raj will whisk me away into something practical,
some activity,
some activity.
or there'll be a guidance to turn on the tape.
Or there will be a guy turn on the CD of one of the gatherings.
Any variety of ways.
And so, so there will be answers in any variety of ways. Right. Yes, occasionally. Now I'm thinking of shorter periods than all day, but where something comes up and it goes on for a short time. Sometimes he says, you guys go out and get something to eat. And just the interruption, the physical change of activity, it's gone. And I don't know what it was, but it's just gone. Now there was something else about Michael's question.
Well, you're not mesmerized by it anymore. It's like the spell snaps out of it.
So when you're talking about the gelling thing?
Yeah, about whether at the end of the day it gels. I know what I was going to say. sometimes during the day when that happens, and like I said, this is not something that's an all-day thing. It's not something that's happened more than 3 or 4 times. But during the day while I'm listening, I won't hear his voice. I mean, when he says something, it's very definite, it's very specific, very clear to me. Sometimes I will hear something, I will feel something that could be more like a hunch, or that's the way it feels. It's just a soft awareness of a fuzzy specific. Does that make sense? And it will be, to me, unbelievable. And so because it wasn't
Unbelievable because of the fit of it, you mean?
unbelievable, because, well, it's like, it couldn't be them. I know them. I know what's going on with them. It couldn't be that. Or I will hear it and I'll share it with Sue, and she'll say, well, but what about this and what about that? And it's like, because it wasn't sharp and clear, it's like, yeah, you may be right, and so I'll discount it. And then at the end of the day, maybe we actually end up hearing from that person. And we find out that what I had been hearing was right on the beam. But there was evidently not enough trust to pay attention to it, because my assessment of whether that was reasonable got in the way. I mean, my assessment that that wasn't reasonable got in the way. So sometimes at the end of the day, it comes and I find out that I had gotten it already, but not with enough clarity for me to set it down.
And then when that happens to me, sometimes the thing that blocks it is I say, well, that's not my guy talking. That's just me.
Yeah, Michael's saying sometimes when that happens, then he jumps in and says, well, that's not my guide, that's just me. And yeah, I think we all do that.
But isn't that kind of changing though?
That's what my guy had said.
But isn't that kind of changing to be like, there is no me? I mean, really, like, that's starting to happen to me. Like, there isn't a me. There is the clear broadcast of the one thing going on, and I am the presence of that, and the mouthpiece for that, or I'm resisting that, and, you know, embodying the resistance. You know, it's like electrical almost.
Judy's saying that a lot of what's going on with her comes down to like the thought, there is no me. You know, there is no me to do this and do that.
Test 1, 2. Sorry, Dad.
There's no experience of that. It's like there's an experience of space where there used to be me. But it's better.
Oh, great.
Can you hear me?
Is it working, Chris?
So, I mean, I'm wondering, as you're talking about hearing, you know, a softer prompt than a clear voice, that maybe the whole range of, you know, of what we're receiving is changing, and therefore really like a shift of identity, because it's like we're just receivers all day, and what are we receiving? And what are we going to do with what we're receiving? And what are we going to broadcast? And hey, it's just like the show. But, you know, so there isn't so much a me, except that the ego would want you to believe, oh, there's a you, and you're working it out, and your soul is evolving, and you've got a threshold, and you've got this, and you've got that. When there's really just the enjoyment of joining with the way it's working, the love that's happening, the presence of God, and that feels really good. That feels better than me, frankly.
And most of all, having
Oh.
and most of all, having a clear mind. Because it suffers. It's too much suffering to be in any level of confusion. The contrast is too great. So all that I desire or work for is like coming up for a breath of fresh air. Every moment that I can feel the clarity of mind, whatever my name be called, wherever I am, whoever's listening or around, that clarity of mind is my lifeline.
You remember the analogy of the puppet? You're a puppet, and that free will is it's just the ability to be able to choose between the ego or listening to your guide or the Holy Spirit. Remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I've always wondered about is I'll be listening, and I'll hear my ego on one side, and I'll hear my guide on the other. What is it that's listening as an entity? You see, that ties into what you were saying, Judy, about me, about what is the me. And of course, that question is as old as the hills. Who am I? And so you could say, well, that's just awareness. But awareness has a presence to it. You see what I mean? So if it's not your ego, and it's not your guide, and it's not your higher self, because if it were your higher self, there wouldn't be anything to listen. You would just be it, and not listening to it. You see what I mean? So it's almost like there's a third entity, not the Holy Spirit, not your ego, but pure conscious awareness being. Like, what is that? Yeah, that's you. But you were saying it feels like there wouldn't be a me. Yeah.
Well, and as you feel that, you really do feel that really is a oneness with everybody, because, I mean, you're the same conscious being that I'm conscious being. But when you said, what's the tangible presence of its body, the tangible presence of your conscious awareness is body.
You mean physical?
Well, it's not physical, though. It's non-material. I mean, it's not solid matter, but it's palpable, it's tangible, it's recognizable. It's,
Experienceable.
yeah.
Okay.
Who wants the mic?
Last week, he was talking about we don't know what love is. We just have an idea about it. And so I always go to the feeling of it. It's like when you're watching a movie and you feel or you can be not watching, talking to someone or anything, and you feel your heart melt. You know what I mean? Where your heart melts and you get warm and fuzzy or emotional about a touching scene or a puppy or whatever. I wonder if that's approaching. In other words, if that is closer to, because your defenses go down, and that
He says yes, indeed.
you're closer to what real love is. So that would mean that you'd have to feel that way all the time if you were love. And of course, right. Right. And
He says defenselessness allows the full spectrum of meaning about creation that you are giving your attention to register with you. And because it's defenselessness, you feel soft. You feel as though you have let softness in.
or melt it.
Yes, a hard heart melting. That's the nature of defenselessness. Defense is a shield. It is armor. It is as dense as you can possibly manufacture it.
Yeah, and it feels like two things I've experienced myself, and another one I've had a student tell me this week, and that was that you feel weak. Like I feel weakness. I feel like I'm weak in that state. You know, when I'm defenseless, I feel weak. And then a student told me that I was leading a meditation, and she said she got tears in her eyes, and she felt her solar plexus begin to melt. She got tears in her eyes, and immediately she thought, and we all had our eyes closed, and immediately she felt like, oh, I can't do that because somebody's liable to see me crying with tears in her eyes. So the defense came back in that way.
Well, we're often not able to detect when defensiveness is happening. One of the most common experiences we have when we're uncomfortable, and I know Paul has this as well, and it's the constant preoccupation with how well I am doing.
Mhm.
Am I doing well? Am I not doing well? It is a horrible suggestion that comes from the desire to care a lot, to want to do the right thing, to want to do the good thing. And sometimes that's why there's this huge gap where nothing is happening, where we have to sit for 6 or 8 hours and not do well, and look straight at the fact that no accomplishment is happening, and that indeed we're
Nothing's
not
happening
doing
that you
well,
can get credit for.
and there's no friend around to rescue us from the harsh, the stark realization that that's just not going to be where our happiness is coming from. And so the parameters have to become different, and searching for those parameters can seem to be a time-taking thing, because parameters just aren't the same and they don't register
Well,
in that
but
same way.
and
We
they're
keep
almost not.
looking for some form of reassurance then. If we're not doing well, then isn't there some reassurance that we just might be? It's an addiction. It's an addiction.
Sometimes I'll, like you, Paul, I'll sit around and say, what am I supposed to be doing right now? What am I supposed to do? And so I'll get this instruction to go do it. And then immediately my willfulness comes in. Oh, okay, I'm going to accomplish that because my guide said that I should go do that. And then that feeling of I got to go accomplish that comes in, and then I get willful, and I mess it all up.
He's like, oh, good. He gave me something I could do.
Right, to accomplish. And then my willfulness comes in. I attempt to accomplish it, and then I mess it all up, and then I blame it on my guide for telling me to do it in the first place. But you learn that way.
Well, when you were talking about the parameters, just the absence of that conversation, me, how well I'm doing, me, just the absence of that has no parameters. It's infinite. And that's what's really disturbing. That's the most disturbing thing and disorienting, because it's like, whoa, there's no markers here. It's like I was on a little path, and it was really narrow, and I thought it had little signs of which way to go. And now there's like this vast openness. Who am I? What am I?
Where I'm sure to make a mistake.
Well, but there is no criteria anymore for mistake or not mistake, good, bad, right, wrong. It's not dual. That's the singularity that he's talking about. It's one thing going on. There's only one thing, and it's like a pulse. It's like a pulse, and if you do nothing else when we sit for those long times, we do feel the pulse of peace. It's like there is something going on that I didn't make, that I don't have to overcome, get better than, try to master, try to work it to my advantage. That didn't work. there's something going on that I don't know what it is, but it feels different. And that feels like the switch of operating systems that he's talking about. That, I knew everything about that old thing, and I know nothing about, but I don't have to. That's what's even more disturbing to the ego, is I don't actually have to know anything, because it appears that it is provided to me as I need it. And I can't even build up like a bank account of that, though, of like, oh, well, all those other times it was provided, so in the past, so now it will. It's like God makes all things new, God makes all things new, God makes all things new, now, and I can't ever get a handle on it. And the harder I try, the worse it gets.
But there's a complete involvement.
Yes.
Now this week,
So it's not empty. It's just empty of personal authority.
yeah, well, there was a very focused learning for me this week about that, because I think I had some of the worst thoughts, and then I heard him say, oh, just go past that. And then I had some of the worst mistakes happen in my day or my week, and machines that weren't working correctly in the house, not just tonight, but and to hear, let it not matter. Go on, just wait till your next thought. And I began to relax into the fact that truly nothing seemed to be fitting together or going very well, day in and day out. And I thought that was the thing to master. It was the thing, though, of practicing a little more grace in saying, oh, okay, I'll let that thought go, or I'll let my forgetfulness go, or I'll let the imperfection that I saw over in my neighbor's yard go. And so every time that I did that, the interesting thing was, physically, I began to feel renewed. Physically, I didn't have that pain I had the moment before, and I wasn't expecting it to be so close to home, where the headache that just started to come on because of some irritation vanished. So moving through, I look back on the week and I realize the issue of moving through was like they were pushing me to keep just moving through. Go on. You didn't get a track on that. You didn't get a road map. You didn't understand how that happened. But let's move on to the next moment. Let's move on to the next. Let's just move on. And moving through became one of the practice times where I thought, this is going to just throw me out of commission. Oh, I stumbled on a step and my hip seemed to go out of joint. Keep on moving through. Why, it slipped back in. It was like, don't skip the step that you normally do to first worry and consider what the problem was about, to go into depth of where you didn't do it right. It was this week was like a speeding up and a shortcut where I almost found I was floating, but oh boy, they got me to do it, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to fall any minute now because I'm not keeping track of everything I'm doing. Hope that's understandable.
I just want to say to everybody out there in audio land that we have Virginia with us here tonight. And she's been very calm and patient with us, taking all this in. Yeah, you haven't been fed. So, anyway, I just want to say, I'm going to leave, but I just want to say, Paul, I really appreciate what you're doing here. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to hear what you have to say. And also acknowledge the fact that no matter how many times I listen to one of the CDs or the recordings that I'm able to download, it's always fresh and new. And I think that was one of the biggest revelations that I had this weekend, is when he said that now, your body, you are being renewed now, and now, which means that we always have an opportunity to be fresh and new and healed and together in the next moment, always, no matter how bad it seems, no matter how much trouble we have, it's always the next moment. Everything could change completely and be totally healed. So thanks for that. And I'm going to say good night.
Right, yes.
That's very good, Michael. Thank you for that.
Oh, good night.
It's 10:47.
Yeah, we got enough. Do you want to go, or do you want to stay?
10:11 Tenferry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could.
Can you pack it up that quick?
Things are good.
Can we pack it up that quickly then?
I mean, we can.
We have to leave everything out.
Are you offline now?
No, but Dad, if you want to say bye to everybody and stuff.
Okay. Well, we're going to call it a night. If anyone is listening, I'm glad you were with us. And without being in charge or in control, I certainly hope we'll have a meeting next Sunday or next Saturday, and that everything will be functional. Okay. Thank you.